Mark chapter 9. The entire lesson today, the cry of faith, the cry of faith. Many times as we study the Bible, if we don't keep things in context and really think about what's going on at the time, then we miss some really important lessons. And I'm afraid that's what I've done in the past on this text. I have read many times through the Bible and many times read this text, but I never did make the connection. And I'm excited this morning to get to make the connection with you, because I think many of you have probably done the same thing, didn't realize what the connection was as far as Mark chapter 9 is concerned. We're not going to read the entire chapter. We're just going to start at verse 14 and read the through 29, and then we're going to go back and put it in the context of which it was written. Mark 9:14. When they came back to the disciples, they saw a large crowd around him, and some scribes arguing with him. Immediately, when the entire crowd saw him, they were amazed and began to run up to greet him. Verse 16. He answered them, "What are you discussing with them?" And one of the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I brought you my son, possessed with a spirit, which makes him mute. And whenever it seizes him, it slams him to the ground, and he foams at the mouth, and he grits his teeth, and he stiffens out. I told your disciples to cast it out, and they could not do it." And he said to them, he answered them, saying, "O unbelieving generation, how long shall I be with you? How shall I put up with you? Bring him to me." They brought the boy to him. When he saw him, immediately the spirit threw him into convulsions, and he fell, and falling to the ground, he began rolling around and foaming at the mouth. And he answered his father. He asked his father, "How long has he been this way?" And he said, "From childhood. It has often thrown him both in the fire and into water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." Verse 23. Jesus said to him, "If you can, all things are possible for him who believes." Immediately the boy's father cried out and said, I do believe. Help my unbelief." When Jesus saw the crowd was rapidly gathering, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "You deaf and mute spirit, I command you, come out of him, and do not enter him again." After crying out and throwing himself into terrible convulsions, it came out, and the boy became as much as like a corpse, that most of them said, "He's dead." And Jesus took him by the hand and raised him, and he got up. When he came into the house, his disciples began questioning him privately, "Why could we not drive him out?" He said to them, "This kind cannot come out by anything but prayer and fasting." As Jesus is dealing with his ministry, many different kinds of things happen with him and also to his disciples. At this point, we see a very important thing happening as far as Jesus' ministry is concerned, as far as his life is concerned, as far as his teaching is concerned. In verse 19, he said, he answered and said, "O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him to me." Now, to keep this in the context of which it was written, you got to understand that Jesus has been up on the mountain. And on the mountain of Transfiguration, Jesus met with Peter, James, and John went up on the mountain with him. And as they were up there, Jesus met with Elijah and with Moses. Elijah and Moses appeared with Jesus up on this mountain right before this, earlier part of chapter 14, chapter 9 right here. And so as he's come down off the mountain, he realizes He's thinking about these men don't understand what's going on. Because while they were on the mountain, and while they were seeing Elijah and Moses talking to Jesus, Peter says, you can read the earlier part of that chapter right there. This is great. I'm paraphrasing this. This is great. Let's build 3 tabernacles here. Let's set some tents up. Let's all stay here and live here. This is wonderful. And Jesus looks at him, and of course, then Moses and Elijah disappear. A big cloud comes up over the mountain, and out of the cloud, God says, "This is my beloved Son. Hear ye him." And Moses and Elijah disappear. Now, keep it in the context of this just happening on the mountain. Jesus knows his disciples don't understand what's going on. They're wanting to set up earthly tents, and everybody camp out here. Let's just all have this camp out. Let's all spend time together. Let's enjoy being with Jesus and Elijah and Moses. Can you imagine what Jesus thought as he looked at those guys and they came up with this? Now, this is an important lesson, not just because it's in the Bible, but also because God is trying to tell us something. He said, don't misunderstand what's going on. Something very important has just taken place, and they missed it. They missed it. We could tell by their actions, their attitudes, the things they said. They missed what really happened. Jesus had been talking to Elijah, the one that was to come before Christ. The last thing in the Old Testament says, one like Elijah will come. And he's right there. Elijah's with him. He's talking to Moses. The law of Moses was written and fulfilled and all done by the law of by Moses. These great prophets. And yet Jesus had a discussion with them. And Jesus' disciples missed the point of what's taking place. He comes down off the side of the mountain. And after he comes down off the mountain, he finds these people waiting for him. But right there in verse 19, let's look at one more time. He answered him and said, O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him to me. Right here, we're seeing a cry of faith. A cry of faith. On the title of this lesson, a cry of faith. Because right here, Jesus is saying, what does it take? How long is it going to take you to catch on to what's going on? You're missing the point of the whole thing. But Jesus says something very valuable, very precious right here, and says, bring him to me. Bring him to me. Bring the boy to me. He didn't go in discussion. He didn't say a lot of things. He just says, bring the boy to me. Now, in the context of that, you realize Jesus is realizing some really important things. A cry rung from Jesus' heart at this point. Jesus had been on the mountain and faced the tremendous task of what lay ahead of him. If you're filling out your blanks today, you're going to put tremendous task. With Elijah there, Moses is there, it's all coming to fruition right here because Jesus is going, yeah, this is what I've got to do. This is what's got to take place. Wouldn't you have loved to heard that conversation between Jesus and Elijah and Moses and then reflecting on what had happened with them in their lives? We don't have time today to talk about that. It's incredible when you study Elijah. To me, I think there's good reason for this. Greatest prophet in the Old Testament, Elijah. Elijah never died. He didn't die. You remember what happened to him? The Lord took him up in a whirlwind. Didn't die. Incredible individual. And then there's Moses with him. Moses, Jesus said, was the most humble man that ever lived. He taught God's law. He lived by it, taught people. I think great leader as far as that's concerned. He decided to stake his life on the redemption of the world. Your next blank there's redemption. He stakes his life on the redemption of the world. Now, right here, Jesus is making a decision. I've got to lay it all down. He talked to Elijah. He talked to Moses. He'd been on the mountain. This is where it all comes together. It's coming together for Jesus to understand these things. Now he'd come down to find the nearest people to him, his followers. He had his own chosen men, beaten, baffled, and helpless, and ineffective. He's come down off the mountain now, seen Elijah and Moses, and here's his disciples, beaten, baffled, and ineffective. They couldn't take the spirit out. They couldn't heal the boy. So he's going, wait a minute. Here's the thing. Such a sad thing. He must have felt the sudden realization of what everyone else would have called a hopeless task before him. The hopelessness. How do I possibly get this done with these men? These men, such a lack of faith that they have. And yet we got such a great task to do here, as far as that's concerned. He must have almost despaired. Your next blank there's despaired of the attempt to change human minds and human nature and make men of the world into men of God. The despair of trying to turn men's lives around and help them be what they need to be. Think about that for a little bit. Jesus has come for this task of turning these men's minds around, getting them to be the ones who evangelize and teach people about Jesus. And yet, they were faithless. They didn't have the faith that they needed. How often do you see that with ourselves and other people? He's got a great task for us to do, and yet oftentimes we don't have the faith to do the task. Faith without works is dead, James says. Do we have the faith to do what he wants us to do? And then we look into his lesson here. But did he meet with, what did he do when he met with the moment of despair? When he was really despaired, what did Jesus do? Now, this is what I want us to really get today, because I see so many people that are so despaired about life. What am I going to do? What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to life? What's the future about? This is what Jesus is teaching here. Now, many times we miss this because we don't understand what's happening with Jesus and his disciples. He's meeting with despair. What am I going to do? But notice what he does. He says, bring the boy to me. Bring the boy to me. What an answer to despair. He doesn't rebuke his disciples. He just says, oh, ye of little faith, why didn't you believe? Why aren't you trusting me? Bring the boy to me. We'll take care of that in the future. It'll all work out fine. God has given us a great lesson here, an important thing for us to understand, because as we do, we see what Jesus did. He said, this is what I want you to do. See, living the Christian life is not rocket science or brain surgery. It's not that difficult thing to do if we keep our focus. Keep our focus. When we lose our focus, everything gets out of kilter. Our focus must be on Jesus, being like Jesus. Jesus is saying here, this is what I do in despair. I don't know what to do with these disciples right now. They're not getting it, but this is what I do. Bring the boy to me. When we can't deal, your next blank there, is two words, cannot deal with the ultimate situation. The thing to do is deal with a situation which at the moment confronts us. If we can't deal with the ultimate situation, what's going to go on? Who's going to be president? What are we going to do about the COVID? What are we going to do about the Russians? God says, you know what? That's not for you to know. You don't have to know that. Do what I've got for you to do. Jesus is saying, there are certain things I want you to do. Now, I don't want you to be in despair about things all the time. Have you noticed that in our society? How despair is just running things and controlling things. What are we going to do? In my private time and my prayer time, I laugh about it. It's funny to me. I think this is the way people operate when they're not trusting God. This is the way people operate when they don't have faith, you see. It's despair. What are we going to do? They're listening to the news. They're listening to what everybody else says. They're listening to the president. So they're going, wait a minute. God is the one in control. The other night before the election, several of us got together. We got back here and we prayed. Several people prayed together. I told them, no sense of praying about this. We don't believe it. Believe it. It's going to happen. God's going to do it. I don't care what odds are against it, what everybody's saying. God is going to do what he needs to do. We're going to live with it. We're going to appreciate it, see. And now we see the other side of the story, see what's happened. If it had gone the other way, I still would have believed the same thing. It needed to go the other way, whatever happened. See, sometimes we think we got to see it and it's got to be our way. God said, no. These disciples had the same problem. They thought, it's got to be our way. No, you're not understanding what's going on here and what's happening and what God is doing with you as far as that's concerned. As we understand this, the despair goes away, realize there's a meaning for this. Let us get on with the present task and not despair with the future. Get on with the present task. God has things every day for you to do, be working on. Don't despair about the future. Just for a moment here, let's take a little inventory and you think about it. What's your present task? What does God want you to do right now? I ask myself this every day. What is it today that I need to do? What's really going on? What's the present task as far as that's concerned? Again and again, that's a way to avoid The blank there is to avoid despair. If you want to avoid despair, avoid being like everyone else, think about the present. What does he want of me right now? What can I do right now to take care of his business right now? Jesus is saying, I can't control these disciples, what all they're doing, and followers right now. But I can heal the boy. I heal the boy. I take care of the boy. If we sit and think about the state of the world, we may become very depressed. Your blank there is depressed. Then let us get on to action in our little corner of the world. Depression comes from people blowing things completely out of proportion, going, I got to control the world. No. I remind myself almost every day, I'm Rod. I'm not God. I'm not God. You see, when we think we're God, we think we got to control everything. God said, no, you're not in control. Trust me. I've got this. I'm taking care of these things as far as it's concerned. We may sometimes despair over the church, what the church is doing, and wonder why people are not doing things we think they ought to do. But he wants us to think about our own little part of the world. What's our part of the world? Every once in a while, I talk to somebody who says, well, I can't worship there anymore. I can't do what's going on here, those kind of things. Not anybody doing anything wrong, but I just don't agree with things, the way things are. God is saying, you're not in control of the church. I'm not in control of the church. God's in control of the church. It's just like families. Have you noticed? I don't know about you, but I'm finding perfect families out there. All families have troubles and struggles and things going on. But you don't leave a family just because they got struggles, difficulties going on. We do our part. We take care of things. In the family of God, we do the same thing. Do what you can do to take care of things. And the despair goes away as far as concerned. Jesus did not sit appalled and paralyzed, your word there's paralyzed, at the slowness of men's minds. He didn't sit around and wonder and go, why is it this way? He didn't become paralyzed and just stop doing things, stop moving because of what people were doing. Have you noticed how oftentimes our tendency is to say, well, if I can't do it, I'm not going to do anything. God says, no, you take care of what you can take care of. You do what you can do. So many times we think we can't do it all, we're not going to do anything. Or if we can't agree with it all, we're not going to agree with anything. So no, wait a minute. What can we do? Not become paralyzed. The surest way to avoid pessimism and despair is to take the immediate action that we can take. And there's always something we can do. To destroy despair, be upset, bothered about things, take immediate action. What can I do now? Who can I teach? Who can I pray for? Who can I share something with? Who can I console? Who can I help with their health issues? Lady called me last week and said, Rod, I got a problem. I said, well, what is it? My cat. I need somebody to take care of my cat. Well, I've got a cat. She knew I had a cat. I said, okay, what do we need to do with the cat? She said, I got to go in the hospital. I don't know how long it'll be there. Will you take my cat? I said, yeah, I'll take your cat. Went and got her cat, took care of her cat, been feeding her cat every day, take care of it, even the litter box, all the things about the cat. I look at that cat and I think, that cat's pretty special to somebody. It's not too special to me. It's special to somebody. And because it's special to somebody else, it's special to me. You see? That's the way it is. When we help somebody else's children, we help somebody else's husband, we help somebody else in their life, God says, they're special to me, Rod. They better be special to you. You see? That doesn't mean we got to love them like somebody else does, but God has said, you do your best. You see? I love them. You need to love them too. You see? So many times we get in despair. We think, oh, I can't do anything. Yes, you can. You can. It's amazing what all you can do if you set your mind to it and really think about it. The father of the boy, Jesus stated the condition of the miracle to the father of the boy. He says, here's the condition of the miracle. In verse 23, notice what Jesus said. Mark 9:23. Jesus said to him, if you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes. Notice what the father says. I've been to your disciples, they couldn't heal him. Now, do something if you can. If you can. I almost laugh every time I read this verse because God, can you imagine going up to Jesus and say, can you do something? If you can do something, why don't you do it? And God's going, if you can. You know who you're talking to? You're talking about the one that created the world. You're talking about the one that created the boy. You're talking about the one that created everything. If I can. How often do we pray like that? Lord, if there's anything you can do, please do it. God's going, if there's anything I can do, you just hide and watch. I'll show you what I can do. But the biggest thing that has to happen is I got to change you, you see. Notice what Jesus said. Everything is possible for him who what? Believes. Believes. Do you really believe? Now, I know this is a little tricky, and it takes some time to do. And most people just naturally don't believe. But when you get to it, when you really get the message here, you get going, wait a minute. No sense talking to God or doing anything if I don't believe. How much do I believe? I want to ask you today, how much do you believe? How much do you believe? Do you believe that God's got your past? He's got everything taken care of your past? Do you think God's got your present? Do you think God's got your future? See? It's amazing how God has said, I've got this. Believe me. Believe me. Now, I'm not going to take care of it unless you believe me. That's what he's saying here. It's not about me doing it. It's about you believing it. How much do you really and truly believe? Or do you believe enough to lay it all on the line? Okay, it's your way or no way. See, you believe enough to pray about it, continue to pray about it? Go, wait, but no matter if I see anything or not, you're going to take care of it. You do take care of it. Do you believe it enough to ask him for it and thank him in the same prayer? You're getting there if you do. See, God, this is what I need. This is what's going on. And I appreciate it so much that you're taking care of this. You ever had anybody just really trust in you, really depend on you, and go, listen, I've got to have you take care of this. Kind of almost like a life and death situation. And you go, wait a minute. I'll take care of this. God is saying, I want that kind of belief, that kind of trust as far as you're concerned. Matthew 17:20 says, if we've got the faith of a mustard seed, we can move mountains. The faith of mustard seed, we can move mountains. He says, how much faith do you really have? Do you trust me? You can do great things if you do. It was as if Jesus said, the cure of the boy depends on, not on me, but on you. If the boy's going to be cured, it's not about me. It's about you. Are you going to trust me? Remember, to approach anything in the spirit of hopelessness is to make it hopeless. Next blank there's hopeless. Anytime you approach something in the spirit of hopelessness, I can't do it. It's hopeless. It can very well be done, but you can't do it. It's hopeless as far as you're concerned. On the other hand, to approach anything in the spirit of faith makes it possible. When you approach things in the spirit of faith, I'm trusting God. I'm going to do what God wants me to do, and that makes things possible. The sad thing is, most people don't realize it. A statesman by the name of Couture once said, what a statesman needs above all else was a sense of possible. Possible. Is it possible? It is possible. It is possible. I'm going to go for it. You see, what are the things in your life right now you're going for? You don't know how in the world it's possibly going to work out, but you're going for it anyway. We should have things all the time that we're going, this is impossible. I can't pull this off, but God can. It's impossible. God says, but you're trusting me for it. What are you trusting me for? Now, if you're not trusting him for the impossible, you're not trusting him at all. If you're not trusting him for the impossible, you're not trusting him at all. Going, wait a minute. Don't just trust him for things you know is going to happen. That's going to happen anyway. No. Things you go, I don't see how in the world this is going to happen. We should have a list of things. We don't know how it's going to happen. We're trusting him for it. He's guiding us in it. Most of us are cursed with a sense of impossible. And I think there's impossible. We're cursed with a sense of impossible. Don't you love it when you hear people talk about possible things? You're thinking, what are the odds this person doing this? Several years ago, there was a man on Johnny Carson's show. It was over 100 years old. He had him on there several times. Maybe some of you might have seen him several times. I had him on there until he was 110 years old. When he was about 105, his wife had died several years earlier. He decided to get married again. And he found this young lady that was about 80 years old and decided to marry her. And so his grandsons came to him at the wedding, before the wedding was. And they said, Grandpa, what if something happens to one of you? He said, boys, if she dies, she dies. Nothing's going to happen to me. The impossible, see, think about the impossible. So many times we're going, no, wait a minute, it'll happen because I think, no, wait a minute. What if it doesn't happen? And then the last thing is, the whole attitude of the father of the boy is most revealing. He shows us things. Notice originally, He'd come seeking Jesus himself. To begin with, the Father had come to seek Jesus and said, I want you to do this, but Jesus wasn't there at the time. Since Jesus was on the mountaintop, he had to deal with his disciples. And his experience of them was discouraging. The next blank there is discouraging. His experience, the Father's experience of the followers was discouraging. His faith was badly shaken. So badly shaken that when he came to Jesus, all he could say at first was, help me if you can. I wonder how many people's faith is shaken because of Jesus' disciples today, the followers of Christians. They get talking to them and going, wait a minute, they can't do it. Maybe I can't do it either. Maybe it's impossible to be done. Sometimes I think we're discouraging people to be Christians instead of encouraging people to be Christians. See, it's discouraging when people aren't living by faith and expecting the impossible to happen and look at the impossible things. I've had a lot of experiences with people who have lost hope in my life. I still deal with it. Every once in a while, I have somebody come to me and they go, I've got no hope. It's not going to work at all. And I talk to them about hope. Here's what's possible. This is what you're not seeing. You don't see the other side of the picture. Doesn't matter how flat a pancake is, it always has two sides. Here's the other side. Christians are people who go, wait a minute. No, look at the possible to the impossible. Then face to face with Jesus, suddenly his faith blazed again. When he got face to face with Jesus, he goes, wait a minute. I believe. I think this is possible. Also look at Mark 9:24. Immediately, your blank there is immediately. Immediately the father of the child cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. Now notice this father of the child, Jesus says, here's what the deal is. He gets face to face with Jesus. Jesus says, you got to believe. And he said, I believe, but help my unbelief. Help my unbelief. You ever had a sick child? You ever had a sick child? It's a different sort of feeling when you have a sick child. I remember years ago, our youngest son, Stephen, was having ear infections and things. Kathy said, my wife said, it's getting pretty bad. I said, it's not that bad. She said, yeah, it's getting pretty bad. His bedroom was next to our bedroom. I said, no, he's not asleep yet. Listen to this. I said, Stephen, can you hear me? No sound. Stephen, can you hear me? No sound. Stephen, can you hear me? No sound. And I screamed, and I won't scream at you today. Finally said, what do you want, Dad? I said, it's really bad. I can't hear. So we took him to the doctor, and he got better. I'm just saying that when a child's sick, your heart goes out. Here's his father. He comes to Jesus face to face in what? Tears. He's crying. He swallowed his pride. He has nothing left, and he goes, Lord, help me. I believe, but help my unbelief. What is he saying to us? He said, I want you to come and not just say the words. I want you to feel the feelings. How long since you talked to God through tears? Through tears. Begging him. I can't do anything about this. That's what he wants. If it really means that much to you, don't be afraid to shed the tears. Shed a lot of tears, a lot of people. About some pretty impossible sort of things. But I've been so privileged in my life to see some pretty impossible sort of things. And if I told you the things today, you'd go, oh, that didn't happen. You're making that up. So I'm not going to tell you the things. A while back, I was talking to my brother, and my brother's talking about telling people stuff we've been involved in and things that happened. He said, I don't tell people anymore. They think I'm lying. I go, it is kind of hard, isn't it? He said, but you know I'm not. This really happened. Okay. God says, come to me in your tears. He says, I believe, but help my unbelief. Help me to believe the way that I should as far as the sermon. In other words, if there's still some discouragement or fear in me, still some doubt or lack of faith, take them away and fill me with unquestioning faith. Your blank there's unquestioning. Fill me with unquestioning faith. I challenge you to write down the things that you really would like to see happen in your life, that you don't see a thing away in the world is going to happen. Away in the world. I don't see how in the world this is going to happen. Sometimes I tell God, I don't care if it happens in my lifetime. Just make it happen. This is important. These people be saved. These people be right with you. It sometimes happens that people get lost, get less than they hope for from the church and from some servant of the church. When this happens, we ought to press on beyond the church to the master of the church, beyond the servant to Christ himself. If the church is not doing what you think it ought to do, go over its head. Go to the master. Tell God. Talk to God about it. It's amazing what can happen with your prayers. See, if other Christians are not doing what you think they ought to do, talk to God about it. See, how often do we talk to everybody else, but we don't talk to God? God is saying, "You tell me about it. I'll take care of it." I've seen entire congregations much bigger than ours split, come back together again. So I didn't have any idea in the world how it was ever going to happen. I talked to God about it. I said, "I don't care. Use me, use whatever I have to do to make it possible." I've seen him do it, bring it back together. Praying for the impossible. The church may not be at times, may be at times disappointing to us. Your next brings are disappointing to us. And God's servants may be disappointing to us. For this reason, we need to individually be responsible for our own faith. Thus, we must stay in constant contact with God, with Jesus, with the Holy Spirit. And the way you stay in constant contact is by study, by prayer, by doing what God wants you to do as far as it's concerned. Jesus did not disappoint the Father. He healed the Son. Jesus will not disappoint us as long as we walk by faith and not by sight. He said, "I've got you. I'm taking care of you." But you're going to have to walk by faith, not by sight. While I've been talking this morning, some of you sitting there know you're not saved, but you're lost. You've been considering it, thinking about it. I admire you for that. Don't put it off. Do like these ladies have done this morning. Take advantage of the opportunity while you have it. Someday you might not have the opportunity. Or you might know somebody that's not saved this morning. Think, "I don't know how in the world we're ever going to get those people to become Christians." Seems impossible, doesn't it? Pray about it. Act like it. Live up to it. Do what you can do. Sometimes people are just waiting for you. You invite them. A brother, a sister, a mother, a father, a friend, a neighbor, a coworker. Invite them. Encourage them. Study with them. Or somebody else that can study with them. If you're there this morning, you need to obey the gospel. Don't put it off. You need to study more. We'll be glad to study with you. Help you. This man got to see this impossible thing happen to his son because he believed. Jesus taught him how to believe. Jesus didn't get blown away by the despair of his lack of the disciples' faith. He went ahead and did what he could do. Do what you can do. Do it today. Don't put it off. If you have any spiritual need, won't you come as together we stand and sing.